Hey everybody, I'm Alex Cohen.
And I'm Sara Sadhwani.
And welcome to another edition of the Inside the Issues podcast. We got a lot of things to talk about once again, including former Sheriff Alex Villanueva. He's back in action, hoping to be the newest county supervisor here in Los Angeles.
Can't wait to break that one down.
Yes.
And as always on the Inside the Issues podcast, we're going to City Council, where there's new information that that redistricting commission might form. We might see an expansion, but not for a long time.
Yeah, wait for it. Wait for it for a long, long time. And last but not least, I had the chance to sit down with a Republican presidential candidate who came all the way from North Dakota to kind of talk to Californians about what government could learn from the world of high tech. So, Sara, let's just jump right into it.
Let's do it.
Alex Villanueva, I remember it feels like not that long ago, shortly after the last election, he was beat by Robert Luna to become our next sheriff. And I met with Alex Villanueva at his CrossFit gym in Whittier. And I asked him, like, what's next, bro? You going to run again? What's going to happen? And the vibe that I really got from him at the time was, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, running for sheriff was one thing because he was the sheriff before, but, you know, he felt
and an
like
officer before that.
Right,
yeah.
you know, or had been a sheriff's deputy before, right?
Yeah.
So he'd been in that field, but like, would he run again for sheriff? Would he run for another office? Like, what does he do with these political headwinds that he had built during his time in that position? And lo and behold, this week he holds a press conference in Whittier to announce that, yes, indeed, he is running for office, but against Janice Hahn.
Against Janice Hahn. Well, let's back up just a little and
back
recall
up as far as you like.
You know, when he came in as sheriff some years ago. It was to a lot of great fanfare, with hope and expectation that he was going to be a great reformer. LA County Sheriff's Department, of course, has faced all sorts of controversies over the years, even before Villanueva's time. But in his tenure as sheriff, he kind of switched the tables a little bit there. He has become known as the Donald Trump of Los Angeles. So while he came in with a lot of support from the sheriff's unions and the sheriff's associations and other deputies, he lost much of that support throughout his time in the sheriff's department, and ultimately got a spanking from Robert Luna in the last election, losing that election 61% for Luna, only 39% for Villanueva. Yeah. And so I find this a really fascinating development, right? Throughout his time as sheriff, he was incredibly antagonistic towards his bosses, the Board of Supervisors, and was constantly on the attack mode. Of course, invading Sheila Kuehl's home in the early dawn hours.
Well, he sent deputies there. Invade, I feel like, is a strong word. I know that it raised a lot of feelings. But let's before we go too far on that, let's take a step back, because I think it's really important that you kind of remind us the trajectory, right? Running in 2016, was it, in the alternative, or 2018, in response to Donald Trump saying, I'm going to get ICE out of jail, supported by the LA County Democratic Party, to this event this week where the step-in behind him said Save LA 2024, kind of doubling down on that. I'm here to save things and make LA great again. He didn't say that, but he kind of did. And he talked a lot about the Board of Supervisors and what he would do were he to be elected. Let's take a listen to what Alex Villanueva had to say.
I cannot find a measure of success in any activity the board is engaged in. And I'm going to focus on crime, on safety, on homelessness, on county corruption. And all these things really come to the forefront because of the decisions from the 5 members of the board, who up until today have always operated in this aloof, well, no one knows what we do, and let's keep it that way, and it's all about the political class, and they anoint each other and support each other, and this thing keeps rolling on without sense. And they're spending $44 billion of your hard-earned taxpayer dollars, and you have no idea where the money is being spent. Well, it's time to pull the curtain back and see what the Wizard of Oz is doing behind those curtains.
Yeah, so I think you're right, Sarah. Like, how much of this is him wanting to be part of this body and be back in politics again versus how much of this is just kind of retribution, revenge, like Board of Supervisors, you had it out for me, now I'm coming after you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't help but feel that way to some extent, that he's coming after them. He has constantly had this antagonistic, somewhat misogynistic response to the Board of Supervisors, which is, of course, all female at this point in time. I want to note, however, that I do think that there's some validity to some of the pieces of that clip in particular. You know, when he's talking about $44 billion, I tend to agree that there's some transparency issues. We only have 5 people who are responsible for allocating $44 billion. That is a lot of money. And just in terms of that system of governance in and of itself, right? There is no executive branch. There's no checks and balances. There's not a whole lot of oversight even. I mean, even if we compare it, we have this conversation that we're going to talk about in just a second for the LA City Council, and how, you know, only 15 members for a city of 4 million is not enough. It's not enough representation.
And so they do the math, 10 million in the county level with 5 people. That's
right.
2 million residents
per supervisor, and a whole lot of money. I think one other factor that I can't help but notice in this is that this is now the first supervisorial election after redistricting, and Janice Hahn's district changed significantly. LA County, for the first time, used an independent redistricting commission at the county level, and finally, after decades of calls to create a second Latino majority district, they did it. And guess who's sitting in that Latino majority district? Janice Hahn. She lost in the redistricting process some of those wealthy beach cities in the county, and now her district spans through Long Beach, Cerritos, Artesia. So a very different profile than she might be accustomed to. And no doubt Villanueva is banking on this notion that as a Latino, you know, he really went after Robert Luna in the sheriff's race, trying to shore up his Latino bona fides, that he was more Latino than Luna. He could speak Spanish. He was a boy from the neighborhood. No doubt he's going to try and play in on this. I don't know that Latino voters can just are going to just accept sort of blind acceptance of someone from their own community, given his whole profile.
Well, first of all, I think we should talk about our word this week. Time for our weekly segment, What's the Word? The word this week?
Launch.
Right, because he was launching his campaign, but I think also launching a movement, because I want to note that during this announcement, he said not only my running, he was like, look, guys, this is a big year for where I'm calling on run against all these other supervisors that are out there. Run against Holly Mitchell. I was like, whoa, okay. Really interesting to note that. He also, not only I think will he likely be campaigning on this message that he is the Latino candidate, but also talking about, crime and safety. He said we don't want to become a doom loop like San Francisco and like what we're seeing in Oregon right now. And really honing in on, there was a great piece this week in the LA Times looking at crime, the actual rates versus the perception of crime, and how politicized. And even now polling is showing that Democrats have a completely different view of where, like, the stats are the same. How many homicides, how many burglaries, that doesn't change. And actually it's gone down by many counts here in LA. And yet, whether or not you perceive that, because politicians really bank on that. It's a great way to launch your campaign. Yeah. And Janice Hahn, it didn't take long, just hours before Alex Villanueva's press event, she launched an email saying, like, all right, we're in it. Like, give us some money. This. And it's probably helpful for her campaign to get that momentum of people. Alex Villanueva, he is like the Bikram yoga of politics. No one feels neutral about that guy. Like, people love him, people hate him. I think his candidacy also raises some questions for me, Sarah, about the bubbles that we all live in. Because, Alex Villanueva, especially once he was done being sheriff, like the only space he's really occupied since then has been an Instagram. Like, he does a lot of these live Instagram feeds.
And his CrossFit gym.
His CrossFit gym, but at Facebook. And like I watched the campaign event on Facebook where the people who are going to show up and watch that are the ones who are like, love you, going to give my $5, And so I wonder how much Alex Villanueva is just hearing that, and maybe like the stats that you brought about running against Robert Luna. It's like, oh, that's passed him over. But all I'm hearing and feeding off of
is my social media bubble that loves me and supports me.
Yes, and I will add his wife. Vivian Villanueva, who introduced the whole event. And I think like there's a very Shakespearean kind of Lady Macbeth. She has been the woman that's been right by his side. And I have a feeling I would just have loved to have been sitting and, the kitchen table with the two of them as they had that talk. Are we going to do this or not?
Right.
And my gut feeling is that there was a big push.
Yeah.
From her.
That's right. That's fascinating. I feel like at some point we're going to have to do a show just on political spouses and the roles that they play, because I think this comes up so often, right? We saw it with Mark Ridley Thomas, and when, his wife standing by his side. Anyway,
and
for another time.
And political names, and also the parental relationship or family relationship, because Janice Hahn,
for sure.
Take it away.
Right.
Remind
of course,
us who
she is a part of a political dynasty. Her father was mayor. Her brother has held office. So the Hahn name carries a whole lot of cachet, especially in this area. She served in Congress. She's been around forever.
Yeah.
So absolutely, she's going to have that name recognition that goes along with it.
And that's
which
a campaign
goes a very
point.
long way in a campaign. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and on both sides, right? Because Villanueva's team, I can't remember if it was the former sheriff himself or one of the folks that he had speaking in support of him at this event, but they made reference to this Hahn dynasty and Dad. And I think the line was something like, "Daddy's not around to protect you anymore, Janice Hahn." And I remember I heard that, I kind of got chills down my spine. It's it's just a lot of big feelings in this race, and this notion that Kenneth Hahn was like dragging his name into it. It felt a little odd.
It felt a little odd. I think that's fair. And at the same time, I also am somewhat skeptical of political dynasties. I always kind of raise an eyebrow to this notion of the torch being passed when we're talking about representation. When we're talking about representation, we're talking about people who will serve and work for the people. And I'm not suggesting Janice Hahn hasn't done that, but the political dynasties always give me pause. And I think it is fair to raise concerns about these kinds of political elites that are able to clench and hold on to power. Maybe it's because they're just really good at what they do. But usually there's a sharing of networks, of resources, right? That's absolutely going to go into that other communities and other folks cannot break into. And so I do think that there's something about that is fair, though the way it was done, really questionable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's move along from the county to the city level. As you mentioned, Sarah, only 5 supervisors for the millions and millions in the county. As of now, 15 seats on LA City Council, but there's been, we've talked about it here before, talk about changing that, expanding it, but then the big question is, When will they launch such a change? And this is a tricky question. And of course, I have to remind folks that I'm actually a part of a scholars group that has provided some recommendations. Yes, skin in the game.
Yeah, exactly. And for us, it's not just about expansion of city council seats, but changing the chemistry and the dynamic of decision-making on the council. Because right now, right, we talk about council districts as, quote, little fiefdoms, and that council members serve as, quote, little mayors. But if we just add more of them, how does that shift any of that? Where do we get additional accountability? So, I don't know, council members aren't taking cash in paper bags. I don't know.
And let's back it up. The reason why the timing may be off on this is because, as you kind of alluded to here, so right now we have 15. There's talk of expanding it anywhere between
21 and
31.
Right.
So if you were to do this, you'd have to draw the new district lines for all of these. Now, we just went through this long process. So the argument that's being made here is, let's not do this until the year 2032, after we have the next redistricting. I don't know. I mean, I guess technically speaking, that's 9 years away, but 2032 feels to me like that is a launch. That is a slow launch to get there.
It sure is. And most certainly it's painful to hear some of these council members themselves. And this is why the council members themselves probably make the worst advocates for these changes, because you cannot help but feel like they are acting from a place of self-interest, that they will be completed with their service or near completion with their service, about to term out, maybe already in some other office, and that it won't bother them, and so because
they won't be there
right
anymore.
Exactly. So that's potentially some of that motivation. I will say this: having served on the state's redistricting commission, let's assume there's multiple scenarios that move forward. Right. So in 2024, we hope to see a ballot initiative for Angelenos to create an independent redistricting commission and to put that into the city's charter. Separate from that would be a proposal for expansion. It is possible one is approved by voters and another one is
that'd be
not.
interesting. Yeah.
So in the instance, if we got a council expansion of whatever size or shape it would look like and had it enacted now, it would mean we would have to put in place, assuming passed, this brand new commission, which we have no precedent for doing. At present, we're not even certain what office is going to run such a commission or go through that process. It is a long and arduous process, friends. It's not easy. I applied in 2019, was selected in 2020. We didn't draw the maps till 2021, right? So that trajectory alone is very long. And the planning to even go into the recruitment phase would have started back in 2017, 2018. So it takes a long time even just to establish this commission. So in many ways, while the self-interest side of it that we're hearing from the council members does not sound great, there are some real practicality issues, I think, at play, and probably 2032 does make sense,
and
actually.
Budgeting. I mean, the thing that I've always thought about is then, if you've got this many resources for 15 members, and how are you divvying that up? And what do council members get paid then, and their staffers, and where do you put their headquarters, right?
That's right. We're going to have to move things around. Yeah,
There's
exactly.
a lot of stuff.
And I'll add one last piece here. If we move to council expansion, I think one of the issues kind of simmering beneath the surface is the very real transitions in demographics in the city. At present, 3 of 15 council members are African American and represent the Black community, predominantly from South Los Angeles. Yeah. With an expansion, that number is likely to go down. The proportion that they represent is likely to go down. The African-American Black population in LA is only about 7% of the city's population. Latinos inching towards 50%. So I think beneath the surface, there's absolutely some concerns from various communities. Asian Americans really acknowledging, wow, we could benefit from council expansion and maybe have an Asian American influence district within the council. So I think some of that's also going on underneath the surface of these debates.
Absolutely, it is. Speaking of African American representation in various political bodies, and bringing us back to our Word This Week launch, former city council member, former county supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas has launched an appeal to the Ninth Circuit Court this week. Kind of an interesting twist. He's supposed to report to jail about 2 months from now, mid-November. I think it's right after his 69th birthday. But attorneys for Ridley Thomas, including Erwin Chemerinsky, again, now becoming another one of those potential political dynasty names, as his son Jeff announces he's launched his campaign to become LA County's next DA. I know I digressed there. So Erwin Chemerinsky and some other lawyers with Mark Ridley Thomas are saying that there was prosecutorial misconduct during his case, misstatements of law, other issues that ultimately deprived him of his rights. I am not a legal person, so I'm not even going to wager whether or not this could be a successful appeal. But it feels like it's just the twists and turns never end between the hurricane delaying his sentencing and now there's this. Yeah. It's a lot.
It is a lot. And I will say, though, I think having Erwin Chemerinsky as a part of this legal team and this challenge is significant, right? Yeah. He is a distinguished scholar at the Berkeley Law School. In 2017, he was named by the National Jurist magazine one of the most influential person in legal education. And of course, here in Los Angeles, the Chemerinsky name, as you alluded to, has a whole lot of cachet. He oversaw the commission process back in the late 90s to reform our charter and get us the city council that we have today, and certainly is a huge name when he weighs in on legal matters here in LA. So much to be seen as how this plays out in what is known as the very liberal Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Yeah. And another launch in City Hall, an ethics investigation into City Council member Katie Yaroslavsky. Want to give us a lowdown?
Yeah. This was an interesting one. Of course, Katie Young Yaroslavsky has not been around that long. She only being elected last fall. She ended up making a hire. Zachary Warma was hired as a part of her team, having served at a homeless organization previously. Turns out they've now awarded a no-bid contract to that organization, which is raising some eyebrows. And this is, of course, within that context. Just a few weeks ago, she had a meeting within her district, and many of the not in my backyard NIMBY kind of folks were out and very angry at the idea of increasing housing and services for homeless people in the region. And it looks like this ethics concern is being raised by some of them, but perhaps for good reason if you're doing no bid contracts.
And who might be on the ethics committee? City Council member Marquise Harris Dawson made an appointment, someone by the name of Alex M. Johnson, who's the VP of a consulting firm. Yeah, a lot of eyebrows being launched upwards as people are saying, well, wait a minute, if you're lobbying people, should you really, apparently really solid person, everyone speaks very highly, but a lot of concerns here on the local level. So much just little tidbits of stuff.
Especially after that Jamie York complete denial of her candidacy for the ethics
choice.
That's
yes.
Right, for the
All right. We're going to launch away from local politics to the presidential race. The second GOP primary debate is going to be held right here in Southern California later this month. I got to go take a tour where they're doing the debate. I hope we can talk about that soon. But one of the folks really hoping to be on that stage, she's close but not quite yet, there is North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. And Sarah, I don't mean to out you here, but you're like, who is that? You're not alone. You're so not alone. But a really interesting guy, like total small town North Dakota guy, worked on farms. His family's for centuries now had like a grain elevator company. He comes out to Stanford Business School. He has this interesting California connection, winds up becoming good buddies with like Steve Ballmer. He creates this software company. He sells it to Microsoft for over $1 billion. Decides like, I really get this technology stuff. Let's see. And running a business, let's see if I can apply that to government. So he got elected there in North Dakota and then reelected. And now he's running for president. People know him in North Dakota. People also don't really seem to know him that much. And that's been tough because one of the requirements to get into the debate is having, for the first one, it was 40,000 unique donors. For this upcoming one, it's 50,000. So what did the guy do? He said, I'll make you a deal, American public. Give me any contribution. It could be $1. I'll give you a $20 gift card. Like, that's a free $19 right there that you could literally earn with the click of your phone.
Will he pay people to vote for him, too?
Well, I'm sure there's some laws around that. And you would think there's laws around this, but there's not. It's totally legit. And he dropped by our studios this week, and I asked him about, like, this particular strategy. And I was kind of fascinated by his response. Let's take a look.
And what we came up with, which was what every Silicon Valley online retail startup has ever done, they've said, hey, we need a promotion. We got a great idea. We're a new company. No one's heard of us. We got to launch with a promotion. And sometimes those promotions are a lost leader. Come to our website. Here's this thing. We created a hook. It went viral. And of course, what we found out is that we got to that donor level at 1/5 the cost of what the traditional sort of DC insider, hire us, we'll do email marketing to a bunch of donors. We got it done cheaper, better, and faster.
So, Sarah, what interested me about this is that this is another example, and we talk about this a lot, like, here's how we've done politics since fire was invented, right? And like we've always thought, we've always done it this way with companies that send out email marketing and that personal text that you feel like you get from Barack Obama to give you money, right?
Yeah. And there are huge businesses that just do this,
huge businesses, which must be
consulting
costing
firms.
a fortune if giving out 40,000 $20 gift cards is easier. But that's $800,000, right?
Right.
Maybe that's an easier way to go. He also said, Doug Burgum, I thought was really interesting that he just feels government in general. He said, I've been traveling all over the country. We all have these, right? We have our phones. They've got a million apps on them, but government isn't one of them. And he feels like we need to bring government into technology. We need to bring technology into government, which is, I'm sure, something that actually probably would resonate with a lot of Californians.
Absolutely.
And finally, one more campaign that launched and held an event that, I don't know, Sarah, I'm just going to, my free advice to any candidate, no matter what you do, imagine that libs of TikTok got a hold of it and think about whether or not you're okay with that. Because I think, unfortunately, that is not what Burbank Mayor Constantine Anthony had in mind. He's running against Catherine Barger, another one of those contests on the Board of Supervisors. He held a fundraiser in Santa Clarita. It was a very LGBTQ plus friendly event. That's always where Constantine Anthony has been. He had a drag queen at the event who spanked him with a paddle. And folks got a hold of this, and it just kind of...
Fox News got a hold of this,
yes. And Libs of TikTok, right? And so it kind of went everywhere. And of course, the think of the children, to which he responded, well, there were no kids there, but if you actually look on the event's mailer, it was like 15 and up. It has not gone over... It was not a great way to launch...
your campaign. Right. Well, and Fox News gets a hold of this and then interviews Constantine Anthony. He's talking about, his defund the police perspective. And so they've really just been pushing out this message around, his, as Fox News likes to do, looking at this uber progressive California liberal and the kinds of policies that he's espousing, which is fascinating because I think the regions within this district, I don't know that this is going to go over so well, but we shall see.
But maybe not in Santa Clarita, but that district also has, and he's from Burbank. I also think with like Constantine Anthony, I find a really interesting individual. One of the very few, if only, elected officials who is openly neurodivergent. He is autistic. He's also a member of SAG-AFTRA. He's been out on the picket lines like all summer long. And one of his quoted responses was, "I come from a very silly performance background. To me, what is goofy and normal to other folks seems inappropriate. That's not their fault. That's mine. I need to learn that line." And to me, what I just really heard there is, part of being differently wired like that is sometimes the way that a lot of other neurotypical people would look at, like, read the room and whatever. Like, can you really fault that for him if that's not necessarily... I interviewed him once, and he told me that even the concept of, like, government, you and I probably think about it as, like, it's this ethereal, like, he pictures things in images. Like when he pictures government, he pictures the Constitution. Like he just thinks differently. And maybe that's not a bad thing, right?
Actually.
It's really, really interesting. So again, it will be fascinating to watch and see what happens as this plays out in social media. If you've got thoughts on whether or not you should have someone, was it the drag queen or was it the spanking? Was it both? Like we have drag story hours and kids are okay there.
Right, exactly.
I think it's something about this spanking. Corporal
Maybe.
punishment, never a good idea. Let us know your thoughts. You can find us on social media. I am there at Alex Cohen in LA.
And I'm at Sara Sadhwani.
We'll see you here next week. The Inside the Issues podcast is a Spectrum News One production. Crystal Goss is our producer. Nathaniel Leathers is our editor. The executive in charge of production is Jeff Shore.